Today, we're going to be speaking with former Republican Congressman from Illinois, Joe Walsh, former presidential candidate, host of the new podcast, White Flag with Joe Walsh. Really appreciate your time.
Hey, David, I've been a fan of yours. It's good to be on with you, man.
Thank you. So, so to start, to give the audience some sense, in the Tea Party era, you were not just a Republican. You were sort of like a leading voice in the Tea Party movement, strong opponent of Barack Obama. And then at some point during the Trump era, things started to change for you.
Yeah. That's a gentle way of putting it, David.
Yeah.
You're right. Look, I was a Tea Party guy, a big Tea Party leader. You would have called me a crazy Tea Partier back in the day.
Yes.
And you and I could have had some interesting debates and fights about the Tea Party, but generally it was about issues. And then Trump came along, and now the Republican Party, the party I belonged to my whole life, is basically an anti-democratic cult. And I didn't want to belong to a cult. It doesn't matter where you stand on the issues. It's always been the issues that drove me. I don't recognize this party anymore.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is when I chart the path to Donald Trump of the Republican Party, the Tea Party, in my mind, was a big piece of that. In other words, yes. You now say, well, the Tea Party made sense to me, but Trump doesn't. But if we go back to the civil rights era and then Reagan, Gingrich in 94, Bush, the way I've seen it is all of this has been a move by the Republican Party away from substance and towards cultural issues and being anti-democratic. And it's interesting that, do you agree that the Tea Party in a way set the stage for Trump?
Absolutely.
Oh, you
David,
do?
You're spot on. And in fact, I've publicly apologized for helping bring you and I and the whole country Trump. What I did helped bring Trump. I look at it like this, David. The Republican Party base is mostly middle-aged, older white people. And for years and years, the party establishment ignored them and their concerns. And then Tea Party people like me came along and inflamed them and riled them up. And then by the time Trump came along in 2016, they were primed, baby, to be captivated by a cult, to be captivated by a demagogue. So I led to Trump. I think the Republican Party establishment did as well.
When did you? So when Trump started to run, what was your initial thought, and how did that evolve over time?
David, I screwed up. I didn't pay enough attention to him. When Trump started running in 15 and 16, I was on the radio, right-wing talk radio, 200 stations around the country, but I never paid enough attention to him. I didn't take him seriously. I voted for him in 16 because he wasn't Hillary. I figured he's just a goof, and maybe he'll play golf for 4 years and nothing will happen. I messed up, David. I messed up. Once he got elected, I started to pay attention to him. And I realized every time he opened his mouth, he told a lie. I couldn't live with that. And then I began to see and really see all the uglier things he did. My final straw, David, was Helsinki in the summer of 2018, when he stood on that stage and said, "I'm with Putin and not the Americans." That was the greatest act of disloyalty I've ever heard. I went on the radio that night and said, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he's not reelected. I began to lose then my radio show and everything shortly thereafter.
So here's one of the things I'm interested in, because earlier this week we were reading about Republicans holding closed door meetings to try to figure out how can we get Trump's grip on the party loosened and all of these things. I've seen no evidence that those folks are actually against the authoritarianism of Trump. It seems they just don't like Trump at the head, but that they're sort of okay with the authoritarianism that has been ushered in by Trump. Where are you on that issue? Like, is the problem just Trump, or is it the Trumpism that, like DeSantis to me seems like it's the same sort of mold, for example?
David, you and I agree, man. I totally agree. Look, Trump has metastasized. He unleashed it. It is now Trumpism. If Trump went away tomorrow, it'll be a DeSantis or somebody like that who It's a party now that has embraced authoritarianism. That is this Republican Party. I don't want to be a part of that. So anybody who stands against that no longer has a place in this party.
So like in figuring out your politics now, when you look at Joe Biden, for example, like just to pick taxes, I don't know, to pick something, right? Joe Biden wants the top tax rate to go up a couple points, and there are some on the right who want like a 25% top tax rate or whatever. When you see the Trump and Biden differences on taxes, like on that policy issue, where would you like to see the top tax rate?
Well, I probably don't support either one. Trump's tax reform piece of legislation that he passed right away, I thought was a lousy piece of legislation because it did lower taxes for wealthier Americans. David, I generally support a notion of a flat tax.
You do?
Simplifying the tax. Oh, yes. Simplifying the tax code so that wealthier Americans who got all the accountants and the lawyers, I think most studies I've read, if you simplify the code, wealthy people actually pay more. I'd prefer a route like that I don't think Biden or Trump support.
Well, I think so. Okay, if you figure out the effective tax that's being paid by the very rich, and then you set the flat tax above that, and you say, not only is this the flat tax, it's also the minimum tax so that you can't loophole and deduct your way out of it, you could have a situation where the very rich do pay more. I think the problem people would have then is somebody making $40,000 a year is paying the same rate. Would you, to dig a little deeper on this, have some threshold below which you pay no federal tax, or how do you deal with the regressive nature of it?
I think there's always got to be some threshold where people at a certain level don't pay taxes. I do believe generally, David, and you and I might disagree on this, the notion of progressivity in a tax rate, I generally oppose.
Really?
I generally believe just a flat rate. And the more money you make, you're going to pay more because you're making more money. But I don't believe you should have a higher rate. But David, what's fascinating to me is I can't remember having this discussion in the last 5 years.
Right.
Like actually talking about a substantive policy issue. The Republican Party doesn't talk about stuff like this anymore.
So to that end, why would they start going back to issues if it's not clear they need to win races, right? And you look at like the Glenn Youngkin victory in Virginia. The only thing approximating, quote, policy was that he would stop the teaching of critical race theory, which was not being taught. So if they can win on that stuff, what's the incentive to get back to policy?
They have none.
Right.
David, which is why I believe, and I get into this debate with some of my fellow former Republicans who think this party can be saved. I don't think it can. Now, but I also believe, David, that I do believe the Republican Party is a dying national party, which might sound oxymoronic right now because they'll probably take back the House next year.
Yeah.
But it's becoming a strong rural regional party. I think its days as a national party are dying.
Is there a national Republican right now that you say that this is someone kind of like this is someone who thinks sort of like me, like maybe Mitt Romney or is there anybody right now that you see and you say, that's who I would like to see the future of the party be?
Well, it's odd, David. I'm not a moderate, and no one would ever call me a moderate, but generally the only national non-Trumpy Republicans are moderates like a Romney. Mm-hmm. But there's no way on God's green earth Mitt Romney or anybody like that could get a nomination in this party.
Yeah, so I guess then the question becomes what happens in 2024. And I think there's two questions. If the question is who has the best shot of winning, I don't think it's anybody you would actually like to see representing the party. If the question is what would be best for the party and the country, I think you're right. There doesn't really seem to be an interest in that type of Republican right now among the Republican voters.
Look, David, never Trump to me, and I'm a never Trumper, never Trump to me means never him and never anybody, any Republican who supported him after 4 years of his presidency. So I can never support any Republican who voted for Trump in 24. That's DeSantis, that's Pence, that's Cruz, any of them. Now, not every never Trumper is where I am, but generally, look, David, I think if Trump runs in 24, the nomination is his. Nobody challenges him.
Yep.
If he doesn't run, you've got to be the most Trumpiest person you can be to win that nomination.
At this point, on social issues, for a while, the most conservative elements of the Republican Party, including the Tea Party, made a big deal out of we're against gay marriage, for example. Abortion played a big role. You know, a lot of these kind of social issues. To some degree, some of these issues are settled. Gay marriage, for example, is settled, and you just don't hear much more about it from Republicans. There's renewed interest on abortion now because of what's going on for the Supreme Court. Where are you on those social issues? And do you think it's to the advantage of Republicans to run on them, or it's better to not even talk about those issues?
It's probably an advantage because that's where their base is. I'd quibble with you on one thing, David.
Yeah.
When it comes to the Tea Party and the base of the Republican Party, I've always thought there were two strands to the Tea Party. Mm-hmm. One was the anti-debt, fiscal, keep your fiscal house in order strand. But there was an uglier social issue, nationalist, populist, bigoted strand as well. And the Republicans, when it comes to issues right now, that's the only game they play is this culture war stuff. And that's all they're going to talk about and run on. Over the years, if I've evolved or changed at all, David, I've probably become more proudly woke. I'm generally more libertarian in my leanings. I always have been more live and let live. But that's not where the Republican base is. They're socially very conservative.
Yeah. And along those lines, what is your assessment of so you've got the voters who, when they're surveyed, Republican voters, around 55% right now want Trump to run again, which is still more than half, but it's lower than it was a year ago. Some similar number believes that Trump was actually the winner in November of 2020. And one of the things we've talked about is, like, do they really believe this stuff, or do they see it as what you have to say to be part of the club? On the elected officials, like the senators and the members of the House, do you think they believe the big lie stuff, or that they similarly realize they have to say it to stay on Trump's team?
Hey, David, I talk to hundreds, sometimes thousands of Republican voters every day. The vast majority of them believe this stuff.
Okay.
When it comes to my former colleagues in Congress, most don't.
Oh, interesting.
You've got a small group of the crazies, Jim Jordan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Paul Gosars. They believe this stuff. But the biggest, most dangerous piece of the Republican Party elected official base is all of those, my former colleagues, who know it's all BS, but they keep their mouths shut. That's the biggest part of the elected officials.
Do you think that if it looks like Trump's gone in 24, they immediately abandon even the premise that they might believe this stuff? Is it just for self-preservation, or they're going to keep going with it?
No, because it's always been about the base. These guys privately, David, have never been afraid of Trump.
Right. When
I primaried Trump, they would call me privately and say, I love what you're saying about him. They knew that they know that Trump has a lock on the base. So they've always been afraid of the voters. They don't want to lose those voters. So again, if Trump's gone tomorrow, DeSantis or somebody is going to get them. And these Republicans are generally cowards. They sold their soul, and it will stay that way beyond Trump.
There's this phenomena we've been seeing along these lines of saying one thing and believing another, where in the last, I'd say, year and a half, or, we could even say like when Trump was banned from Twitter, it became visible. There's the stated principle from some of these folks. Like, for example, businesses basically should be as unregulated as possible. Let them do what they want as long as it's not illegal. And once the real world becomes inconvenient to the principle, they say, oh, we've got to regulate Twitter. All of it. We need government to tell Twitter exactly who they have. We need to force Twitter to allow these views, etc. How concerned are you about the ease with which the principles are abandoned when the outcome is inconvenient?
David, extremely, and it's been the most disappointing aspect of this Republican Party, not just the abandonment of principles, but the embrace of authoritarianism, of fascism, to actually use the power of government to shut down voices that you don't agree with. Look at that crap that DeSantis is doing down in Florida.
Yeah.
Get rid of anything taught about race in schools that makes people uncomfortable, having the government do that. And we're seeing some of the same Republicans in other states who want to shut down speech about LGBTQ issues that make them uncomfortable. This embrace of, I want a dictator to shut up people who I disagree with, that's this party now. I find it frightening.
If you ran again, would you run independent? I mean, it seems like there's basically no home in the Republican Party. It doesn't sound like you really have an interest in being a Democrat.
Here, hey, David, here's the truth. I realized 2-3 years ago, I have no home in this party. Adam Kinzinger and I are really good friends. Adam Kinzinger knows privately he has no home in this party. What do? I could become a Democrat, but between you and I don't know that the Democrats would want someone like me. I don't know that I would fit there. I think what's going to happen is temporarily people like me are going to be political independents. I do believe, David, that within 8 years, there's going to be a new major political party occupying the middle.
Yeah, I mean, because when you look at some of your positions, and if these are out of date, then, we can correct them. But a lot of these things, you're against the death penalty, as far as I know.
Yes.
You're for the legalization of marijuana. You've come around
Yes.
on the science on climate change.
Yes.
On immigration. I guess, where are you on immigration at this point?
I've always been supportive of the party and opposed, in that I'm a huge hawk when it comes to illegal immigration, but I'm a huge embracer of expanding legal immigrants coming in. I don't know where that puts me.
And on DACA, the people that were brought here as minors?
We got to find a permanent solution.
Right.
Period.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it seems, my audience might go crazy, but in talking to you, it sort of sounds like there's not that much difference between you and a moderate centrist Democrat at this point.
Well, that's interesting, David. And today's Republican Party is very anti-legal immigration as well.
Yeah.
So I don't fit there. I'm very pro-gun. I am pro-life.
Right.
I'm very fiscally, I'm very conservative and almost libertarian.
On social safety net, I mean, I know in the past you were at one point I think you said there's nothing in the Constitution that points to having any kind of social safety nets. Have you moderated at all on that?
Well, I acknowledge, yeah, no, that's still true, but I still acknowledge that government needs to play a role to help those who can't help themselves. And I would argue over the years, we've expanded that social safety net to the point where we're not helping the people who really need help.
So you're not against having it, but you want it to function, meet its goals in a better way, I guess.
Yeah, I want it to be more limited to like free college for everybody. No. Free college for people who absolutely can't afford it? Sure. Every government program I want very targeted. We tend to expand these programs to include everybody.
Got it. Well, listen, it's going to be very interesting in 9 months to see whether your version of republicanism is at all welcomed by voters. And of course, what candidates there are to choose from will be a big part of that. But I'm as interested as you are in seeing what happens.
I think, no, I agree, David. I don't think there's room in the Republican Party for people like me anymore.
Yeah.
I think the Democrats have a great opportunity. There's a political realignment going on. The party can grow if they take people from the center right all the way to progressives, because the Republican Party is shrinking.
Right. Former Republican Congressman Joe Walsh, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Hey, David, it's been an honor. Thank you, sir.